My family came here between approximately 1900 and 1920, and that was the great immigration from Italy to the United States period, from maybe the 1880s to perhaps as late as 1950. And they came because our family was from a tiny village. The village is the village of Sant Ippolito, which no one has probably heard of except us. It's maybe 1,000 people. It's outside of a city of a couple 100,000 called Cosenza, Italy, which is a city in Calabria, the southernmost province on the toe of the boot. And conditions were very difficult. People in that era really did not have enough to eat. And conditions were very rough. I mean, some people were actually outside of the money system, which means that they never really had money. They just raised everything, or maybe they bartered some, and gradually those things improved. When I first visited the village in 1969, the children had no shoes, and a lot of the houses didn't have doors, and they had dirt floors and no running water. And now when I visited a few years ago, everybody is middle class, if not upper middle class, and everybody has a cell phone and a little granite kitchen. And you would often see, when I was there years ago, you would see all those ladies in black because black was proscribed for mourning for 5 years following a death in the family. So virtually every older person would be wearing black all the time. Well, they disposed of that particular tradition. You don't see it, and the ladies wear slacks now, and they carry a purse. They're not particularly farmers. They can work at some kind of industry. When my family came here, my dad's side was an exception actually because he was a tailor. So my paternal grandfather, he was a tailor. But that was almost, the smaller part of the story. The largest side of the story was my mother's side of the family, which was like most Italian families. They came here and they were very motivated immigrants. And they worked a little bit so that they could buy a store. They would buy a fruit stand. They would start a candy store, a nut shop, an ice cream store. Those were the main things. And some of those eventually evolved into restaurants. And so many people came from that village, and everybody says, well, why did they come here? But that was because somebody initially came here, and someone has said, well, they thought it was maybe to work on building railroads or some factory or something like that. And then if you're going to immigrate, you're going to go where you know someone else. So that's how they ended up in Lansing. And so they worked. Everybody worked a little bit, and they came here, and then everybody wanted to have their own store once they put together a few dollars. And so those stores, those Italian families from that village of Sant Ippolito, went to, as I mentioned, Grand Haven, Lapeer, Durand, Cairo, Michigan. Virtually every small town, Mason, and just all around. But they still stayed in contact as much as it was possible without telephones at that time. Our village is the village of Sant Ippolito, and we venerate the saint who is the namesake, Saint Ippolito, and his feast day is August 12th. And so in the village, there's a huge celebration there, much, like the biggest celebration of the year outside of Christmas. So in Lansing, we also have that celebration where the descendants of that village try to recreate the procession and the mass and the chants, and we do that every year. There's a small fairgrounds outside of Lansing, and the Lansing families go there. Now, in Lansing, I would say probably 60% of the Italian immigrants were from that village. There was another large contingent, which is probably about 30% of the Lansing Italian immigrant contingent, and they were from a province called Puglia Lecce, which is also in the south, but not quite as far south as we are. But and now that those provinces have been combined into Puglia, and so we refer to them as Lecces sometimes, but it's Puglia. And strangely enough, as poor as Puglia was, now people are going there. Very wealthy people are going there because there's some beautiful resorts. Of course, all of Italy is beautiful, but it was never quite as, world-class, receptive as it is now. So now I'm hearing people saying, oh, we went to Puglia for 2 weeks on such and such an estate on the ocean. And I'm like, really? And that's how much life has changed for Italy. My grandfather had an Italian grocery store. For a while, it was a soda fountain too. But he had an Italian grocery store, which means he carried all of those products which you couldn't get otherwise. You couldn't buy ricotta cheese, and you couldn't get olives, and you couldn't get provolone, and you couldn't get salami, and you couldn't get all that stuff. But you had to go to that store. Of course, now that all that stuff is available everywhere. But I worked at my grandfather's store, and I liked it. And after he passed on and his property was taken over by urban renewal for downtown Lansing, I decided I wanted to do that because I thought it was so much fun. And so I started my own. His business was Paul Fata and Sons. The name of my business was Castellani's Market because he was my maternal grandfather. There's a lovely candy store on Michigan Avenue, which everybody raves about, called Fabiano's. Those are some cousins of my mom's. And there used to be 3 or 4 of those in Lansing. There was Caruso's and Spagnolo's, and they made those, excellent high quality chocolates. And but all of that is a descendant. And like I was saying, for instance, like Emil's restaurant, they began as a grocery store, gradually evolved into serving, because so when those Italians, when they started their restaurants, they wanted to be first in line when Prohibition ended, so that they can be first in line to get either a takeout license or a tavern license. And so a lot of the beer and wine distributors in this area still are Italian-American owned because of that.